Hello and welcome to the Future of Talent Management, creating effective skill development programs for employees. The session is presented by Cypher Learning, and with us today from Cypher Learning is Vanessa Dethard. Vanessa is an educational technology specialist and an expert in learning technologies and design. She has years of experience as an instructor, instructional designer, and user experience usability designer. Her passions include meaningful, critical, and strategic technology integration for training and education. So let's please welcome Vanessa to the session. I see she's turned her webcam on so you can see her. Vanessa, if you'd like to start sharing your screen, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And Melissa, if you could just confirm for me that you can see my screen.
Sure can. Looks wonderful.
Perfect. All right, great. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. As Melissa mentioned, my name is Vanessa Dethard. I am an ed tech specialist at Cypher Learning based in Sacramento, California. So we have a lot of people from a lot of different areas, and that's so cool. I'm really happy to be here with you. As Melissa also mentioned, I have an education specialist degree in learning technologies and design with a focus on training context. So I will be drawing from that expertise today to explore the topic of the evolving field of talent management, specifically when it comes to the increasingly popular approach of skill development. The bulk of this presentation, as Melissa mentioned, is inspired by our recent Matrix by Cypher Learning ebook called Skill Building Success, Using Intelligent Tech Tools for Employee Skill Development. And this will be available for attendees if you haven't already downloaded it. I definitely recommend checking it out if you're interested in any of the talking points that I'll cover in today's webinar. So speaking of talking points, I do have this little agenda. Our journey to examining this topic today is going to include the following agenda items. And these are just re-representations of what you've already seen on the marketing material, the objectives. We're going to delve into the topic by exploring the foundations of future-ready skill development programs, how SDPs impact the culture of organizational success. We're going to look at how to determine skills and understanding why they matter, as well as the all-important what to look for in a skill development solution. And because we have a blend of attendees with different levels of knowledge joining us today, I did want to start off with a very basic, short definition of what a skill development program is. So a skill development program is an employee-focused training strategy. This training strategy targets the development of skills and competencies in a flexible, future-oriented, and meaningful way. And throughout the rest of this presentation, excuse me, this is going to become a lot more clear, and it's going to start to make a lot more sense what all of this means. But the foundation of any skill development program is the skills and the competencies. So I find it really relevant to quickly state the relationship between a skill and a competency, because deeply understanding what these are will help you to better develop effective programs. And the other items that we're going to be discussing further in this presentation are also going to make a lot more sense. So the similarity between a skill and a competency is that they're both focused around getting things done. A skill is focused on doing something, a competency is focused on doing something. In slightly different ways, though, which we'll explore a little bit deeper in a moment. But because of the shared target, they're often used together to create more dynamic and complex development programs when it's applicable. And throughout my career as an educator and instructional designer, I will often notice these two terms being used interchangeably. It does happen. It is common. You'll see it every now and again. However, I think focusing on the differences between the two can help you to really establish better outcomes in the training programs that you develop and to create better value. So we're going to do that. We're going to see here that the skills, when we're talking about skills, they're learned actions and practiced abilities being executed successfully. While competencies, on the other hand, are different. They're a combination of physical, cognitive, and effective efforts, which lead the ability to do something successfully. So to break that down even more, a competency is a lot more bigger picture than a skill. So these are efforts that lead the ability to do something. That lead is really important here. They're not necessarily the actual ability to do something. A set of competencies typically falls into the category of being not agile, meaning that when you're developing these programs, you won't traditionally start with one competency and then build up other competencies from that one through like this iterative kind of phase-like approach. The development of these tends to be more waterfall, more linear in nature. But because competencies are so big picture, they're also aspirational. So they're things that we plan to achieve. And it can take a lot of time, sometimes months, maybe even years, to become fully competent, whatever that means to your organization in certain areas of work. And that's where we see the long-term bullet point also come into play. But also a competency is often non-transferable, meaning it can't be switched out into other higher level goals, because competencies tend to define the skills and the knowledge that people use to perform a specific job. So to put this into context just a little bit more, here we have an example of a job title, so project manager, and we are planning to build a piece of a skill development program. Underneath, we have just a brief example of a possible competency that we can pull for this goal, for this job title. Through this training, a project manager should know how to execute projects of varying sizes by creating, developing, delivering appropriate documentation to stakeholders and project teams. If you don't know what any of that means, that's perfectly fine. What I want you to focus on here is how big that goal is. It's a lot to ask people to do. It's very big picture. It might even be a little bit too big picture, but just for the sake of getting this point across, I think it works. When we look at our previous definition of what a competency is, we can see that some of what is included here is very high level, physical, cognitive, maybe even effective in nature, but nothing here is an actual skill. Here, we're talking about the lead up to doing something, or in this case, several things, because there's going to be a lot of different topics involved in supporting this competency. And we might even start breaking this down into sub-competencies in order to really organize the program accurately. And those sub-competencies will probably come from all of the topic needs. So in order to master this competency, learners will need to know about the topic of scope development and management, budgets, schedules, timelines, so many other things they'll need to know about. So this is where we start to see that waterfall, that linear approach happening. We're not fleshing these out in phases. We're doing it more by topic analysis. On the other hand, skills are a lot more focused. They're more measurable, more actionable, and more transferable. So if we take that example from before with the project manager training, we have the same competency here, but after breaking this down a little bit into maybe some sub-competencies, a skill that we might pull out of this example could be composing effective emails to clients. And I think this only counts if you count documentation, emails as documentation. I do. So composing effective emails to clients. So the difference is between the two is pretty clear. What we have here on the skills side is much more narrow in scope. And comparing this to our definition of a skill, it's a lot more focused. It's measurable in the sense that we can set some constraints regarding what the term effective means to us organizationally, and also around what distinguishes an effective email over a non-effective email during training. We can also say that it's transferable because composing effective emails is not just a skill needed for project managers. This skill can be mapped to other competencies or other job titles related or unrelated to project managers, and it can be used there as well. So now that we understand the foundations of skill development in terms of what is a skill and what is a competency, we need to understand why those elements coming together into a program, into a well-defined skill development program, why that's important. So there are a few reasons why. Here we have a couple represented here on this slide. Firstly, hard and soft skills are changing. So Karen Kimbrough, the LinkedIn's chief economist in 2020, so this year, did a survey where she found that there has been, or a study more so, where she found that there's been a huge change in job-specific skill sets, and that the change is actually set to double within the next few years. So in other words, the ways that we envision common job titles working, or what people within those jobs need to know, how they need to perform, is going to change. And it's going to change, and we're not going to be able to know when that change is going to stop or if it's ever going to stop. And what that's going to do is create gaps. So gaps between the actuals, what is actually happening right now, and the optimals, what we would like to be happening right now. And similarly, over in our second illustration, this statistic comes from McKinsey, the McKinsey Global Survey back in 2020, which found that technology use is still evolving. So I believe that this was done after the pandemic had happened. So 66% of almost 900 respondents for this survey said that they do foresee a bigger focus on modernizing or increasing the way they use technology in their businesses. And another 19% said that they plan to refocus their entire business completely around digital technology, which simply points to the fact that's similar to the first point on here, actually, that training needs of workforces are going to increase, and they're likely going to become continuous. So with a skill development program, what we're doing is essentially we're bracing, we're preparing for this continued change of hard and soft skills throughout industries, I think both on and offline. And we're keeping space also for the evolution of technology and how it impacts the ways that people do things. And we're doing this using a strategy that focuses directly on those actionable skills employees can use to bridge any critical gaps that arise within the organization. So another reason why skills development is important is that currently we're seeing a shift from what many in the industry are now regarding as kind of this old school paradigm, which concentrates on the company as a focal point, to a model where people, employees, stand at the focal point instead. So in other words, we're shifting from this top-down approach where company and leadership knows best to a more bottom-up approach where employees actually know things too, and can contribute to the company in some really creative and passionate ways, and actually push the company farther than it likely could push on its own. And the reasoning here is because employees are the ones who are actually doing the jobs. Because they're at the forefront of delivering success within the companies, they not only have a good idea of the skills that they need to learn or improve for better performance, they also, on a lot of occasions, have firsthand knowledge of the gaps that exist organizationally regarding what's missing for the success of certain initiatives or job roles within the company. And with this shifting paradigm, employees are allowed a position where they can influence more deeply how those gaps are bridged within the company based on how they can show up professionally. And as a note, this shifting paradigm topic, some might regard this as a result of skills-based approach instead of a reason why this kind of approach is important, because the shift definitely comes with the territory. I think you're not going to have a skills development program without including employee voice in some capacity. And the point to a skill development program is talent development. And you don't really build an organizational culture of success by assuming what your talents needs are, by assuming that this person in this department needs full training in this area without knowing what that person already knows or what they actually do to perform their job or what they feel like they need in order to perform their job better. Creating an organizational culture of success really means getting people involved at a deeper level and building opportunities, learning opportunities, growth opportunities, so they can have influence on the way they contribute to the bigger picture. A skill development program organizes all of these components, these goals, competencies, skills, in a clearly defined way, so that people within the company can serve the company in different ways. And those ways that they can serve, those opportunities, we often refer to those as skilling. And these are just 3 examples of skilling types, 3 ways that participants in a skill development program can utilize in the program. Everyone's going to have a different goal, and that's kind of the point, giving people the freedom, the opportunity to move towards what they're passionate about in the company, instead of keeping them confined to this box. They can reskill so they can do something completely different from what they're doing now in order to fill a need. They can cross skill so they can contribute to multiple functions throughout the organization to fill a need, which I think is really cool. Or they can upskill to build on existing skills to fill a need. And the "to fill a need" phrase, I think, is really important here, because essentially what we're doing is giving people the power both to know and say, I'm here, I see this gap that I'm really passionate about, or I'm really interested in bridging. Instead of hiring someone else, someone from the outside, instead of going straight to that solution, let me upskill for a potential promotion, or I'm going to reskill in some areas because there's a need in X department, and I really feel like I could be passionate about the work and contribute amazing things. The point is not to, and I want to be really clear about this, the point is not to not hire people from the outside. I think, granted, we all know that hiring is tough. Hiring from the outside can be really time consuming. It can be risky in some cases, and it can also be quite expensive. But again, I'm not advocating for not hiring new people into the company. I would never do that. But I am advocating for allowing people who are already at your company and to show up in ways that tradition doesn't expect first. So doing that first. So that's what we get with a skill development program. And also for new hires. So when you do go outside of the company and you start to hire for positions from the outside, this having a skill development program can really go a long way in helping new hires get settled in their new role a lot more quickly, which I think is always a great thing. And I think in these ways, what we're providing through an SDP is that we're showing how much we value our people by investing in our people and trusting them. And when it comes to the topic of employees, people within organizations, there have been a lot of studies that, and I know we've all seen them because there have been a lot recently. There have been a lot of studies that try to gauge exactly what employees want from their jobs. Of course, I think a livable wage is often always at the top. But if we take into account previous statistics that we just saw about the skills and the technology evolving, hard and soft skills, and so many other data points which affect employees on a professional level, we notice them wanting other things too. And those other things, research shows, are listed here. To be more competitive in the market is the first one. And I want to focus here just for a moment because this is one that I find can sometimes scare people a little bit, because some people tend to think, I'm putting all of this time and effort into implementing a skill development program in my organization, and just for people to get better at what they do and then leave for other jobs, for other companies. But I think as much as I think a lot of us would love to be able to do, nobody can really guarantee long-term employment for an individual. And there are so many reasons for that, but being competitive in the market is a security blanket for a lot of people. And it's one that a well-developed skill development program offers to its participants. It communicates that you care about your employees' futures, not because they are your employees, but because they are people. You see them as people who deserve that security. And when there's more stable employment situations, in those contexts where the employment situation is stable, employees who feel secure are more likely to feel comfortable where they are. And that, coupled with the second point, more career advancement opportunities, compounds on that security. Because if there are advancement opportunities that I can use my growing skill profile to fill, and it's a good environment, and I feel valued and taken care of, I don't necessarily have to look very far if/when I do want to challenge myself or advance. So with the third point, narrowing our scope specifically to the training bit, people want training that's personalized and relevant to them specifically. I think the days of one-size-fits-all programming are numbered. I think people want efficiency. They want meaningfulness in their training, relevance based on where they are now and where they want to be. And they also want that training to be easily and conveniently accessible, because a lot of people lead really busy lives and they don't want that to stop them from getting ahead or to where they want to be. And all of these come together to create a lot of benefits for both people and their companies. So we've already mentioned some here, some of the benefits that these wants can create, but there are a few more. And going quickly back to the ebook that we mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, there are a few more of these benefits that are mentioned in there. So if you haven't downloaded it, please do. It's great. When the workforce has access to skilling opportunities, there are less limits on how far they can go. They become more engaged, because how they're contributing to the company is meaningful to them as individuals. So when you have that meaningfulness translated into where you work, it becomes more engaging for you to be there, more engaging for you to show up. And through this increased engagement, we start to see better business outcomes, such as the ones listed here. So increased sales, profits, greater loyalty, lower turnover, better product quality at the very least. And these are all amazing benefits, but this is not to say that implementing a skill development program is automatically going to get you here. There are some things that we need to take into consideration before we can build an SDP that will help us achieve these benefits. And as we kind of get towards the end of the webinar, the last question that we're going to touch on is related to that. So how do we choose a skill development solution? How do we make this happen? It's a great question. And the first stop on that question, on the solution to that question, is knowing your needs. So I think without a proper in-depth systemic needs analysis, we're really moving blind, and that does us absolutely no favors in the long run, because it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money to be able to do these initiatives. Another, or some more questions that are also reflected in the ebook. What is your company vision for the next 5 years? Where do you even want to be? So assessing those actuals and those optimals. How can skilling your current employees help you to achieve that? What are the tools that you need to support your initiative, and how can they bridge the knowledge and the skill gaps that currently exist between your present workforce and your organizational goals? Of course, what is the timeline, and obviously the budget? Can't forget about the budget. Having answers to all of these questions is really important to gauge before you start jumping into what your solution should be, because we can't build anything sustainable if we don't have insight into what that thing is or what it should achieve. But outside of knowing your organizational needs, because it's kind of basic, what else should you be looking for in a solution? So one of the things, our advice to you is definitely to choose a solution that enables real world experiences. So as a lot of us may know, a training program is only valuable if it's meaningful, and meaningfulness is cultivated when we can apply what we learn during training in the real world. So your solution should enable you to offer just-in-time resources, JIT resources. And these are resources that can be made available to learners in a very quick, very easy way. Your solution should also offer ways of creating scenario-based learning, practical learning experiences, and project-based assessment methods. I think these are really important. It sounds like a lot, but what this all boils down to is flexibility. So when we think of a skills development program, we're not just focusing on the project managers. Everyone in the organization has a right to participate in a skills development initiative, and it's something that happens indefinitely. So while some of us may be thinking, I don't know if there are any of us here that are thinking of this, but if some of us may be thinking, our factory workers, they only need practical learning experiences. Project-based assessments, they don't really mean anything to us. What you do is you essentially lock others within your organization out of being able to benefit from a skill development program. And you also kind of lock your company out of being able to scale in the future. But with that being said, starting small with a skill development initiative is not a bad idea, but I think we absolutely have to make sure that we have resources there that fit the needs of different groups that we do plan to expand to in the future. So having at least most of these is absolutely something to keep in mind. Other things that we can consider when comparing solutions are adaptive and personalized learning. So adaptive learning and personalized learning I think are crucial to a well-developed skills initiative, because not only do they help those who are in charge of maintaining the program with a lot of the manual work. No one wants manual work these days. They also help learners within the program to stay on top of their own learning in an instant and accurate way. Adaptive learning, or automation, we could call it, also allows you to set rules that are triggered when a learner meets certain conditions. For example, if we have learner X who takes an assessment and they pass this assessment with 30% of the grade, we don't want to push learner X through, as would happen with learner Y, who got 100% of the grade. We don't want learner X to keep going. We're going to want to intervene in some way. And whether that means giving them extra assignments or getting them resources or getting them in touch with somebody who can help them, we're going to want to personalize and adapt that training for each participant so that it meets them where they are and supports them through their journey. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And when you have an organization of 226,000 or even 30 plus, that becomes an immense task for someone or even a group of someone's to manage. So finding a solution where you can make these actions automated is a massive time saver and increases what you can achieve within a program. And I am being mindful of time here. We're almost done because I do see some questions and we will definitely get to those. But the next one is learning paths and goals. When we envision having a skills development program, it's probably very well organized in our head. So hopefully, having dynamic learning sequences like paths or programs and goals, which you can map skills and competencies to, is also really essential in developing a usable and sort of seamless program. With these features, we can have a target goal, like the project manager job title from the earlier example, that's comprised of these skills and these competencies. And those competencies and skills are mapped to resources and assignments, which are organized into courses, maybe even within a program or a track or a path, whatever you call it, so that learners have a clear progression towards mastery of that goal. These two things together work really well to make the program meaningful and valuable and accessible, because you have everything localized in one area, so people can come back to it whenever they need to. Lastly, a last point of consideration would be automated recommendations. So while I think it's amazing to have a solution where we can do all of those other things like create adaptive and personalized learning, have the paths, automated recommendations takes your skill development programs kind of one step further, because it allows the platform to make automated suggestions for content and resources that encourage and support the skill growth of your learners. So these suggestions would be based on mastery. So that 30% that learner X received on that assignment can trigger the system to make suggestions for courses or for content or resources that would fit the learner's need for assistance with mastering the skills mapped to the failed assignment. So there's that intervention, but instead of us kind of fleshing out what that intervention is going to be, the system kind of helps us by recommending certain things that can help with the mastery. And so this is kind of the difference between having a learner path that's just laid out in a finite manner and having kind of this web of interconnected things that people can benefit from entirely holistically on the system. So really, really cool stuff. And again, it comes down to flexibility and what employees want. They want the personalized training, they want accessibility and convenience. So this is definitely a really important and very innovative feature to consider implementing. And I wouldn't be a good employee if I didn't very subtly mention as we finish up that our corporate solution matrix, by chance, contains all of the recommended features shared today. What a coincidence. But we also have many more features that I think can really help with customizing your skill development program in easy and meaningful ways. And as an EdTech specialist, that's really, it kind of speaks to my heart because I get to work firsthand with companies in implementing Matrix as a solution for many different kinds of initiatives, but skill development initiatives included. And I highly recommend reaching out if it's something that you're interested in hearing more about. Additionally, as we've mentioned previously, you can read more about skill building success with intelligent solutions like Matrix. Our ebook has about, I think, 8 chapters, and I think I've only talked about some of them today, but there's really great stuff in there. So again, if you haven't downloaded that, please do make sure you do. And then we will go to Q&A because I took up a lot of time. Sorry. Okay. So
There are a
nothing.
couple questions for you, Vanessa, in the Q&A. You're welcome
Okay.
to open it up and read, or I'm happy to read those out to you. And for everyone else, if you do have any questions now and you'd like to post them in the Q&A panel, you can find that in your Zoom system tray at the bottom.
Okay. So let's start with John. How would you leverage the skill building avenue to decision makers that aren't bought into the learning culture? I think that depends on your decision maker, I think. Some are a lot more easy to to get to than others. But I think with skill, can we get PDF? Yes, we can. I think how to leverage the skill building avenue decision to makers, how to get kind of that buy-in would be doing your research, I think, is the first step, because I think hard numbers are a really important thing with those kinds of decision makers, and really making it clear that this is not just a trend. It's not just something that we're going to be using for a while and then it's going to go away and we're going to replace it. This is something that's going to be here and it's here to stay, and it's going to be built sustainably so that the return on investment is going to be a lot higher. So I think that is the place to start, is starting with the return on investment. Hopefully that answers your question, John. In my organization, we define skill and competence as follows. Okay, so skill, ability acquired through education, training, experience, or other means to perform a task or an activity with a specific intended outcome. Competency, ability to apply knowledge, skills, and attributes to achieve intended results. What is your view on these definitions? So the one thing about skills and competencies is that in the literature, a lot of the research that you'll do, you'll find a lot of different definitions for skills and competencies. And as I mentioned, you'll often see that they're interrelated. I think they're often used interchangeably, or the definitions can often be really close to each other because they're often used together. So I don't necessarily see them as like these separate entities that are totally removed from one another. I think in some instances, competencies and skills can intertwine with one another, but I think that in doing that, there has to be a reason for doing that, and there's not always going to be a reason to do that. But I like the definitions. I think that the definitions of how you separate or how closely you bring together skills and competencies is going to depend on how it best works in your organization. And I don't always think that it's a clean transfer from one definition over to an organization in every single opportunity. So Nazreen, I hope that answers your question. And then Elizabeth, can we get a PDF for the presentation? I don't know, Melissa. Can they? I think so.
That's up to you, Vanessa. If you're okay with
Yeah,
it, we can post, you send it to me so we can PDF it and post it with the recording if you're okay with that.
cool. Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, when we
Awesome.
will do that.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining. It was a wonderful time. Hopefully you learned and got something out of it. And thank you for having me.
And thank you, Vanessa, for our wonderful presentation. Thanks to all of you for joining us live. Again, there is an ebook associated. I've posted that in chat, and I'll post it one more time for you if you need that. And we will also PDF Vanessa's slides and post that with the recording. If you registered for the event, you will receive a follow-up email within 1 business day with a direct link, but you can find all of our recordings up on the e-learning industry website under webinars. So just give us 1 business day for those to be ready.